Good morning, my friends. Grim here. I hope all is well, and welcome to Perusing Premodern number 7, featuring a fascinating deck, 5-color Gro-A-Tog. The structure of this video is actually going to be different from the others that you've seen, and there are a couple reasons for that. Number one, I'd like to get the view counts up, and I know Premodern is a niche format, and I think that's pretty much why the view counts generally haven't been as impressive as I'd hoped, with a couple exceptions. But another reason for that might be the length of the videos. So if I can shorten up this video showing just highlights of gameplay, rather than 3 full matches in their entirety with all the organic pauses and moments of tanking that happen, well, maybe that'll juice up the view count a little bit, or at least pull in some people that might not otherwise care to watch a video that's 2 hours or so in length. The other thing is that I think the play patterns of this particular deck will lend themselves better to that highlight style rather than to full matches, as you'll see maybe as I go through the deck text, certainly as you'll see when we get into the actual highlights of the gameplay. So what better time to try out that theory that a shorter video might bring in more views than right here, right now. That said, rest assured, we're going to still do a nice, long and thorough deck tech, as you're used to on this channel, to explain the ins and outs of 5-color Gro-A-Tog before we begin looking at some gameplay footage. So thank you very much for watching. Thanks to all Patreon supporters. Let's talk about this fascinating deck and what exactly it's trying to do. Alright guys, so 5-color Gro-A-Tog is a deck that turns creatures sideways to win, but in a way that is very different from, for example, 3-Deuce, which I played last time. You're going to go tall with Psychotog and Kyria Dryad. You're going to tempo the opponent out like crazy, abusing Mox Diamond and Winter Orb, among other things, and you've got a Xerox element in the deck with all of these 1-mana blue cantrips, and indeed free blue cantrips in the form of Gush. We can free cast with other spells as well. That's basically what the deck does. It is extremely spell dense in terms of what an average turn when you're functional looks like. The cards that you're using come together in a way that is just absolutely breathtaking. The deck design here is amazing, and I have to shout out Carlos or Alana, perhaps Oriana, I'm not sure, who actually tagged me in the Premodern Discord following the publication of my Threshold video to say, that list is pretty cool, but I think it's kind of just a worse 5-color Gro-A-Tog, so of course that piqued my interest. This is actually Carlos's most recently published list. Just to go line by line and break it down a little bit further for you, there are only 9 basic lands, a single plains to be fetched sometimes off of Flooded Strand, but this deck, despite being 5-color, really lives and breathes based on its islands. We've got some beautiful promos here that look very nice, fit the deck very well in my opinion. This island could quite easily host a mage casting Gush, wouldn't you say? So 9 basic lands, 8 being islands, 4 Flooded Strand, so only 17 lands total, 4 of them being fetches, and 9 being basics. So right away you can see that the prospect of like blind drawing a land off the top is pretty low, especially with thinning a little bit involved. And with 5 colors and half of our small land count represented by islands, and then more than half represented by things that can only get islands or plains, yeah, it's definitely a little bit sketchy at first glance, but it all comes together in terms of mana production on the back of 4 copies of City of Brass, of course, a rainbow land, and 4 copies of Mox Diamond. Now, this deck really uses Mox Diamond better than any deck I've played so far. And I have dabbled in a wide variety at this point of Mox Diamond decks. I'm no expert with any of them. But the best praise I can give Mox Diamond in this shell is that in other shells that I played Mox Diamond, I felt that against an attrition deck, you know, like the Rock, that can remove artifacts, that can take away cards out of your hand, can put you into top deck mode very regularly, I found myself considering at least trimming 1 or 2 Mox Diamond post side. In this deck, it never even really occurs to me to trim Mox Diamond. I don't think you can afford to. I don't think it's designed to really do that most of the time, and that just shows you how integral and powerful that card is in this deck. So, moving on to the spells. Mox Diamond's a spell, but you get me. 4 copies of Opt, 4 copies of Portent, 3 copies of Sleight of Hand, so we've got 11 1-mana blue cantrips, affording us a great deal of selection, which is very, very important in this deck. Portent and Opt work well together in that if you have extra mana, you can main phase the Portent into an Opt potentially, and thereby have a more efficient turn. Sleight of Hand is arguably just the weakest overall, hence only 3 of, but, you know, depending on your exact needs, you could see maybe playing the 4th over something, including the 4th Portent. All of these cards very often are trying to dig you toward one of your 2 Winter Orbs. As you'll see in the gameplay, this card is absolutely broken in a shell like this. That said, it's not always what you need, it's not always good against the opponent, and it's definitely not really any good in multiples except as redundancy against removal, therefore only a 2 of, but with all the selection, you can interact long enough and select enough to find it a great majority of the time. 2 copies of Counterspell and 4 copies of Daze represent the main deck permission. Now, Daze in conjunction with Mox Diamond and Winter Orb, I hope you're seeing how all this comes together. You can really take a lot of game actions while still representing permission, even sometimes when you're totally tapped out, and either way, you can get ahead of the opponent, really, really tempo them out, interact on the stack. What's the payoff for doing so, you may ask? Well, it's the creatures that go tall that I mentioned right at the beginning. Kyrian Dryad is a 1/1 green threat for 2, but whenever you cast a spell that is white, blue, black, or red, we've got a ton of blue spells, they're cheap or free, and all of our sideboard rainbow cards are going to buff her too. She's going to get nice and tall super, super quick, and Gro-A-Tog, different dimensions on which it operates, different resources that it kind of utilizes, but it goes tall in the same exact way. And in fact, these cards overlap in a very positive way. They don't really take from the same resource pool. You're going to cast a lot of spells to grow the Dryad. After you've cast the spells, you're going to exile them from your graveyard to grow the Gro-A-Tog. You'll note also that a lot of the very powerful cards we've mentioned, like Mox Diamond, Winter Orb, and Permission, these cards can actually be dead late game some of the time. Gro-A-Tog, of course, you can pitch them from the hand to grow him as well, thereby making the cards good early game, fantastic early game, I might say, and even good late game when you've got Gro-A-Tog online. Rounding out the threat suite is 4 copies of Meddling Mage. Unlike Gro-A-Tog, this is actually much better in multiples. You only really ever want 1 Gro-A-Tog, except, again, against redundancy, for redundancy against removal. It's just like Winter Orb, that's why they're both 2-ofs main deck. Meddling Mage, of course, as a 4-of, gets better and better, because it's not redundant, you can lock out multiple different spells. This card doesn't grow, so you're just going wide with Grizzly Bears if Meddling Mage is part of your beatdown plan. 4 copies of Fire and Ice allows you for a little bit of main deck removal. Probably more often than not, actually, in this deck, you'll be casting it as Ice, which is going to grow Kyrian Dryad, synergize really well with Winter Orb and Daze, but certainly Fire is live as a finisher, a combat trick, or sometimes as a 2-for-1 removal spell. 4 copies of Gush, probably the most raw power in the deck available to us, comes from Gush. This is going to do everything. It's going to reset your lands under Winter Orb, further breaking the symmetry that's already very skewed in our favor. It's a free blue spell for Kyrian Dryad. It's going to grow Gro-A-Tog like nobody's business after you've drawn and cast all of those spells. And of course, it's just very, very powerful generally to have a draw 2 that can be cast for free. Speaking of free cast, the final 2 cards in the main deck are foils. 4-mana counterspell. But alternative casting cost, you may discard an island card and another card rather than pay this spell's mana cost. So again, synergy with Gush, you're bouncing a land back to hand that you may no longer need and then discarding it to foil. This is another also decent use case for those late game dead Mox Diamonds or Dazes that have passed their sell-by date, so on and so forth. And indeed, with all of the land drops that you can make by Xeroxing through your deck, and of course Mox Diamond to jump out ahead, hardcasting foil happens all the time. And then the sideboard, my friends, is where we get rewarded for being a 5-color deck, because you can really have your pick of the litter as long as you're not too greedy with color costs. And as you can see, everything is just one single pip unless it says another Psychotog, which of course we're a blue-based deck, so there's no double white, double red, etc. Anyway, let's talk about the cards that are in there, I guess starting with Psychotog, when you need to up your threat density, when you think the game is going long against mid-range, basically, or perhaps sometimes when you're also trying to race a combo deck, you just want anything that can turn sideways. Third Psychotog is your guy. Engineered Plague, obvious use cases, 3 copies of Chill. We're really respecting red with a deck like this, which makes a lot of sense because they're going to price us into getting our threats down early, perhaps sometimes be unprotected or not big enough to outsize their spells early on, and perhaps their spells are so cheap and efficient that they can beat Daze and Winter Orb and cards like that. So we play Chill, which of course synergizes immensely with Daze and Winter Orb to really flip that script on the red decks. We've got a single red elemental blast for blue mages. We've got Pyroclasm for go wide opponents. And note that Kyrian Dryad does not survive Pyroclasm, but it does survive Pyroclasm if you cast any other spell before it. So it's not that hard to get Kyrian Dryad or Psychotog out of Pyroclasm range, but it is a little weird to see on the face of it because all of our 10 main deck threats are just X2s, right? Or X1s even. But we can manage Disenchant. Of course, you can't really have a deck without Disenchant or Naturalize or something like that in this format. Ray of Revelation, destroy target enchantment, and it's got Flashback. We like this card. Triple Swords to Plowshares for those big threats you can't otherwise beat. Even the ones that outsize Psychotog, they're just going to get plowed. And then a One of Armageddon. This is a cheeky strategy as a way to steal games in a wide variety of matchups, actually. Of course, the idea here being that we can, once again, really abuse Mox Diamond and Daze on the back of a successful Armageddon. So that is what the deck looks like. Of course, I am no expert with it. I'm not the one who built it. I've only played a handful of games with it, the highlights of which you're actually about to see. But shout out to Carlos for turning me onto this deck. Thank you very much for watching. Leave your thoughts, of course, on his list and on the archetypes below. The archetype as a whole below, I mean to say. Big shout out as well to Dan and Bobby for playing some games against me and letting me use the footage you're about to see. Enjoy the games, guys. I'll catch you for the wrap-up when we're done. Alright, guys, so we're starting off against Blue-Green Madness. We got smushed game 1, and we've got a couple threats and an opt. It's kind of a medium hand, but that's good enough for me to keep. We're putting enough faith in our deck not to hold the opt, because remember, we have 11 of those, and we're rewarded for it. We opt away a bad land into a Mox Diamond, allowing us to get a Kyrian Dryad online nice and early. That gives us the chance to opt on turn 2. We go a 2-drop into opt. That's a beautiful thing. But having another one in hand and having no lack of land drops, I decide that we're going to try to grow them both. So we wait, we untap, and we go for a second Kyrian Dryad. We are unfortunately getting mana leaked, but that is alright. We do try to opt into Daze, basically didn't work out for us. Could have done something else, but I think that was fair enough. It's a proactive play. We're digging through the deck. We're growing our threats. We found another threat. It's Psychotog, and we've passed up a couple chances to play Winter Orb, which is very good in this matchup, but we're kind of on the front foot, so we're going to go ahead and try to stay there. Basking Rootwalla, we're able to attack and do it once, but now it's good enough to trade with Kyrian Dryad. We could bluff. We're deciding not to. We instead are just sending Psychotog in. We've got a lot of pressure. We lose the Winter Orb to Naturalize. We get to Red Blast the Careful Study, which I think there are enough, certainly more than enough non-blue payoffs that we should be doing it. In fact, most of their Madness payoffs are green. We're starting to kind of lose our juice off the top. We drew a Dead Mox Diamond. We do at least have the luxury of sitting back and holding up a foil now, though. And the trade is fine with us because the exchange of resources benefits Psychotog, even in the face of Tormod's Crypt. But getting to hard counter a hard cast Arrogant Worm is definitely very nice. The graveyard's clean, but Psychotog is still bigger than Basking Rootwalla when neither one of them can grow. So we're just going to go ahead and beat in for one. We force the trade that way. It's definitely nice. We select into a Swords to Plowshares. OP's got another Arrogant Worm. and down it goes. So we're going to give him some life back, but we're still keeping the board nice and clear, and hopefully this is going to be good enough with Counterspell for backup. So we counter the Deep Analysis here, pretty easy. Mox Diamond again, dead in hand, except as a way to Gro-A-Tog. Getting across the line, Arrogant Worm will daze it just to make him pay a life, right? Just to make him pay a life. So he's ripping a lot of really good threats off the top, and look at that. We rip lethal in the form of fire. Could have tapped down the worm as well. So basically, we did not have a perfect curve out here, but we had a good one, right? We got one of our threats countered. We didn't use our mana efficiently every single turn. We didn't get an early Winter Orb down, and kind of passed up a couple chances to do that and really lock the opponent out for a while. Of course, he had an Actualize anyway, but leaving that aside, not a perfect curve out, but aggressive enough to have the opponent constantly on the back foot, and then a mix of permission and indeed burn off the top, all while kind of having just enough gas, being just enough ahead with the Kyrian Dryad or with the Fuel for Psychotog to force negative trades for the opponent. That's an example of how this deck can really play kind of an aggro permission game. And that's not what it always does. Sometimes it's cleaner than that, sometimes it's more lopsided than that, and sometimes it doesn't even work, right? But this was kind of an imperfect but very solid aggro permission progression. Now in the tiebreaker, we've got a nice balanced hand on the draw. We're going turn 1, Mox Diamond into fire, and then we're passing, holding up a bunch of instant speed effects. We're going to counter any major threat. I would classify Wild Mongrel as that. We opt away and opt, and we draw an Engineered Plague and a Mox Diamond. So some stuff that is a little bit underwhelming at this exact moment until we cast a Gush. And look at this, guys. We're recycling our lands. We're making our Mox Diamond good. We're seeing a ton of new cards, and the graveyard is huge for good old Psychotog. We see some stuff on the top that you could probably take or leave, but we are holding the Engineered Plague in hand to see if he plays anything out into it. And while the coast is clear, so we think against a blue-green deck, we're going to gobble up that graveyard. Psychotog gets bounced back to hand with Ether Burst, which is some spicy tech, but we've had such efficiency out of our Mox Diamonds that despite recycling lands back to hand with Gush, we still have enough juice to redeploy Psychotog and then daze an Arrogant Worm. Awesome to counter a 5-drop with a free spell. As if things weren't good enough, Basking Rootwalla gets played, which is a great Engineered Plague target. We get to Gush again. We are just going nuts. Opponent wisely will buff the Basking Rootwalla just to make our attack not free until the end of turn, but look at all the new cards we're seeing. He's got another Ether Burst, so the attack would not have connected anyway, but we're just chaining Gushes together. We've got the Plague holding off any future lizards that might try to contend with us, and now we've drawn a Red Elemental Blast, which seems like a fine one to have in the back pocket. Pass with City of Brass untapped, and that's it for OP. So, granted, it looks like he flooded. He's got, 7 lands in play, possibly another one in hand. We can't discount that. But the efficiency here was off the charts, guys. I don't know if I should really have slowed down at a couple of those points, because just the way that a hand goes from 0 to 100 on the back of Gush, and all the synergies that flow therefrom, especially when you Gush into a diamond and you can instantly kind of rebuild your mana production, and you're not losing card advantage to do so or anything like that. In Game 2, again, it wasn't as efficient. We had to use kind of every part of the animal to get over the line, but here, efficiency was the name of the game. We've got a Tog on board, a Plague on board, and we've got Foil, which can be free cast or hard cast, depending on our situation, Opt, Gush, and Red Elemental Blast in hand. Very, very strong position, even if opponent hadn't been so unlucky with the Flood. So far, some stylish displays from Gro-A-Tog, but you know what else can happen to this deck? We can get turn 1, so we're on the draw against Reanimator, keeping 7, turn 1 Verdant Force, and we just don't have an out to this main deck. So, as much as the free spells can police a deck like this, Game 1, when we don't have Swords to Plowshares in, and when we're also on the draw, so there's no hope of like opting into a daze or something with a hand like this, well, they just got us. Game 2 against Reanimator, we don't have a go tall threat, but we do have a Meddling Mage to turn sideways while hating out an important card. And the hand has got Swords to Plowshares, Daze Counterspell, and Disenchant for Oath of Druids or Stronghold Gambit or a Lotus Petal or whatever we feel like doing. But basically, with the opponent keeping 7, I just decide to daze more or less anything dazeable on turn 1. And we go for it. We can't really stop the Oath of Druids, but we can disenchant it. No need right away, we draw another counterspell, so this is just shaping up to be a hand that plays out kind of like a control deck, right? Except instead of the control elements of card advantage, we actually have some stuff that's a little more quick on the clock and a little more tempo positive. So if anything, it's kind of like a better control matchup, at least in some ways. We find a safe spot to deploy the Meddling Mage, and we've got Counterspell, Daze, and Swords to Plowshares in the back pocket. Opponent is definitely showing us some respect, showing our hand some respect with a couple discard spells, which does burn through our counter spells, but now we start Xeroxing, and now hopefully we'll get a quicker clock going with Gro-A-Tog. It is a little sketchy though. We are shields down, but thankfully our counter of that first careful study seems to have been quite relevant. He's got another one. We'll daze it. At this point, he's losing his entire board to pay for this stuff, but he does go off with an Exhume and a Reanimate and another Lotus Petal to rebuild. So what a turn. Total nightmare for us. We go ahead and untap, just basically thinking we don't need to plow on the end step because we have such mana efficiency. We'll see what else we draw, if anything, but no better play than just to plow the Angel and pass. We're in a bit of a standoff with Penumbra Worm. We could force the issue with Gro-A-Tog, but we're saying, hey, let's just try to draw another plow, and indeed we do. So now Gro-A-Tog, he's gotten hungry. We turn sideways, flanked on either side by Meddling Mage, and that puts opponent to 2. Hopefully, that is enough to finish him off, and indeed it is. Alright guys, I hope you see what I mean about this content being especially suited to the replay forum, because the Game 1 loss doesn't need any more than the 10 seconds I gave it, and there in Game 2, there was a fair amount of both players playing Drago, right? And there will be more of that in the highlights to come, so I hope it makes sense for you. Unfortunately, we're against an opponent on Reanimator keeping 7 all 3 games. We have like an okay-ish hand, but it doesn't feel good enough to beat a 7 on the draw, so I go down to 6, promptly see a no-lander, gotta go down to 5. And now it's like, okay, do we try to keep this hand and maybe hope it's good enough, or do we go all the way down to 4? But on the draw, again, like, basically we're mulling toward Plowshares, in my opinion, and I think I'd rather just keep a functional 5 with 2 ops and try to select for it. So we ditch a land, we ditch one of our ops, kind of putting the lie to what I just said, but, you know, you understand. We've got to keep our one form of interaction as well, maybe in the form of foil. Perhaps he doesn't have the turn 1 nut draw, and it doesn't really look like he does. So we could get rewarded for this depending on our draw. We still don't have another island in hand yet. Maybe we can opt into one if we need to. Anyway, there's Multani Morrow Sorcerer, which is a very strong one against us. And he's going to go for the Exhume, so we're going to go for the opt, looking for something. Mox Diamond goes to the bottom. And there's another Mox Diamond right on the top. The MTGO bug strikes. We're pretty dead, aren't we, to Multani Morrow Sorcerer? Well, probably, but hey. Let's just play it out. Kyrian Dryad's a card, right? Mox Diamond got a lot of little synergies and a lot of little utilities. One of them is not only filling up the graveyard, of course, for our cards, but shrinking our hand to make Multani that little bit smaller. It might not seem relevant, but these little edges with Mox Diamond are definitely something that adds up. Opponent just going to bash us in the face, pass to us. We've got Meddling Mage to grow the Dryad, but really it's just a chump blocker. I'm going to name Careful Study, which just basically anything he might main phase, right? Before we go ahead and chump block. And then it's Exhume into Daze. We're just going to Daze to grow and to shrink our hand, and to make him expend the Lotus Petal. Now, I think that would be worth doing in and of itself, but actually, this is yet another way that bouncing the island back to hand with Daze does many, many things in this deck. It actually turns on foil. So we did mull to 5, and we are also 3-for-1ing ourselves to foil this Exhume. But my god, what a cool play that is available to us in this deck. And all of a sudden, Multani's only a 2-2. It's amazing. Putrid Imp is flying, of course, and is going to go ahead and bash in, and that's all well and good. So basically from here, I'm thinking if we can draw a land, get our feet underneath us, or start cantripping especially, draw some cantrips, we're going to get functional, it's going to be great. We can actually consider ourselves ahead from here. Instead, we see the downside of foil. It's probably the second copy is probably the worst copy we could draw. We also see the downside of Portent a little bit, insofar as it's just sorcery speed, followed by a delayed draw. So if we had found a land, which is what we shuffled away looking for, then we would be, not as efficient as we otherwise could be. Anyway, we haven't rebuilt successfully, so we're forced to block with Kyrian Dryad, in my opinion. It's definitely a bit of a judgment call. Like, if we were even a little bit more functional, I would say that we could realistically grow the Dryad more than the Multani and get more cards out of hand, but we're not doing either, right? So I think we're just kind of dead. And then on top of that, we're going Ritual into a hardcast Multani, so that's pretty much that. We do end up losing from here fairly horribly, but that, despite all odds, it looks so bad there. But the Daze, taking away the Lotus Petal, and the Gemstone Mine, I think, is part of that, into the free cast foil, all while growing the Kyrian Dryad. That was very stylish. That was very, very cool. Of course, at the end of the day, it's not good enough. We drew a few too many bricks after that kind of all-in play, but it's the only play we had available to us, and it's one that a lot of decks would not have anything like. They'd just be cold to a situation that we were in. So even though we lose that one, it was definitely a good example of how sweet Gro-A-Tog can be, and how many interesting lines there are. Alright guys, let's play some more Gro-A-Tog against the Rock. So we get a pretty sweet start with a turn 1 Winter Orb into a Daze on the Wall of Roots, which might not seem like the most impressive Daze target of all time, but since we're on the Winter Orb plan, I think it should be. Of course, we are already kind of flooding with some of the cards that we've seen, but Sleight of Hand into Fire and Ice allows us to do just enough to really keep going. Opponent's got a Pernicious Deed, and this is actually pretty bad news. We're just cantripping with Ice. We could actually have cast it to tap him down, but I didn't think that was necessarily relevant. And now we pass holding up Counterspell. We're priced into keeping Kyrian Dryad in hand. Here is a downside of these Mox Diamonds and Winter Orbs, which do so lovely a job of breaking the symmetry of mana production. They are very vulnerable to Pernicious Deeds, so we get ourselves X for 1 in a major way there. 3 for 1 on board, and of course also whatever lands we discarded to the diamonds feels pretty bad. But we do get to counter a Blastoderm, and we do get to try to rebuild with 3 threats, starting with a Psychotog. We are only casting 1 per turn because it's triple island, and all of them require non-blue. Opponent still got 4 cards in hand, which is scary, but all he does for now is play a couple of Dorks. Psychotog getting blocked by Wall Roots. We're going to chew through the graveyard quite a bit and go for the kill, only to be smothered. You do hate to see it, but Kyrian Dryad comes out. And at this point, we're far enough behind against mid-range that I'm feeling pretty bad. We have an unbalanced hand. We've just kind of flooded, and then we drew lands and threats only after getting Million for 1 by the Pernicious Deed. So it's easy to feel like we're not going to get there against mid-range, especially because now Recurring Nightmare and Blastoderm Loop is online, right, with Dorks to fuel it. But look at this turn. We're going absolutely nuts with Gush into Opt and Portent off the top, and Kyrian Dryad all of a sudden is a very respectable 5/5. And now we cantrip into Opt, so we can make her a 6/6 at instant speed. We've got Meddling Mage to hopefully lock out the Recurring Nightmare. Unfortunately, opponent's got another Pernicious Deed, which is just so good. Gonna clear out that entire board, play a Yavimaya Elder, and once again X for 1 us. Can we really recover from this? I wouldn't think so, but we draw Winter Orb off the top. And we do have to chump block with Meddling Mage, which obviously feels pretty bad. But we are still in the game thanks to Winter Orb, really delaying the opponent from turning the corner. Of course, Treetop Village would have killed us right then and there, and he's got another 5 cards in hand. But Blastoderm's about to fade out of existence. We can play a Psychotog, and if we get to untap, who knows, right? Opponent's at 20, we're at 2. What can Winter Orb do for us? Wall of Blossoms is actually kind of a desperation move, because his life total's not low, even though Psychotog's a big threat, and he doesn't want to tap much unnecessary in the face of Winter Orb. But look at that. Gush doing the business for us again, seeing more cards, filling up the graveyard, resetting a land so we can counter that Yavimaya Elder, and then we get to untap and keep casting spells, and all of a sudden, we dare to dream. We dare to dream that we might be in that driver's seat. So no block, Psychotog gonna go all in. I guess he could Vendetta us, but that's the only card I'd be afraid of right there. And we're gonna go ahead and connect for 9. Psychotog OP. Another Gush in the back pocket, Daze of course as well. And look at us, no fear, going down to 1 for a Kyrian Dryad. Then we're gushing it yet again, and we've got Daze held up. No attack this time. We don't want to discard cards from hand quite yet. And we are drawing a few bricks off the top, so we're playing a little bit more patiently, giving the opponent a chance to get back into it. But once again, 7 cards in hand, we've got a Daze backing us up, and a Winter Orb just so OP. We've got not that much going on off the top of the deck still, even after a sleight of hand. But there's that Vendetta, sure, fair enough. Meddling Mage naming Pernicious Deed, and then Psychotog biding its time. So, opponent making a land drop, going Cabal Therapy. He actually does name Daze. That's a really good play, and I'm punished not for just dazing, because then he gets to play Ravenous Baloth. I really didn't think he'd name Daze, but he did, fair enough. So as if more things couldn't really go badly for us, that one does too. But we gotta press the issue. Psychotog eating the Wall of Roots, or Wall of Blossoms rather, in combat. Another Meddling Mage naming Vendetta, and another Kyrian Dryad off the top, so it's a creature standoff, with his thing a little too big for ours, and we draw foil. So we're happy to play Drago because we've got permission now. He's happy to play Drago because he's getting out of the Winter Orb and prepping, hopefully, for a big turn. Again, the top of our deck not really doing us too many favors. We can now attack with Psychotog just because we have some expendable cards in hand. We pitch a couple lands, we eat the graveyard a little bit. Ravenous Baloth is going to, of course, gain the life, but now we've got the board clear, minus the Treetop Village, which we do have to respect. Here comes another Baloth, which would have been nigh unbeatable for us, but we get to hardcast that foil. He's got another Treetop. Back to us, porting off the top, let's go. We keep Xeroxing, we keep cantripping. This game is totally and completely nuts. We're going to put those cards on top, and we're going to send everything in except for something to stay back and block the Treetop Village with. So, the attack, including Psychotog buff, puts opponent down, and we're going to kind of, you could, again, perhaps ice there proactively. I chose not to. With only a couple lands to play with, I really don't think it matters. He goes for Cabal Therapy, we fire in response, which is going to do to grow the Kyrian Dryad, and that's going to do it. So a 23-turn victory here on the back of Winter Orb buying us so much time after we got X for 1 to Oblivion twice by very backbreaking Pernicious Deeds. And then we face down the recurring Nightmare Loop and all this other stuff that really would be nigh unbeatable if he had the full use of his mana the whole time. But thanks to Winter Orb, he didn't, and we claw back in to victory at 1 life on turn 23. So after that heroic victory, we promptly see a no-land 7 and go down to a no-land 6 and settle on a 1-land 5. So this is not a recipe for success against the Rock. T1 Birds of Paradise. We go for a sleight of hand, just trying to rebuild a little bit. Cabal Therapy is going to whiff, but then Wall of Blossoms means he's got the luxury of Therapy for flashback at no card disadvantage. We portent to find a second land, among other things, but it is going to take a minute to show up, and we're just falling so far behind. Gush is going to take away our Mox Diamond, Cabal Therapy is going to take away our Mox Diamond, and then both of our Gushes, so we are just getting ripped to shreds. It is definitely a deck that's vulnerable in some ways to interaction, especially when we lack functionality like this. And Blastoderm's got Shrouds, so we can't plow it even if we could find one, and a white land for it. We can't really beat that card. On to Game 3 we go. Alright, Game 3 on the play. We get to have a nice balanced 5-land, 2-spell, low curve spells at that type of hand. I'm not sure exactly how good the Winter Orb is in this exact spot, but we play it and then we are rewarded by drawing the 3rd land and indeed then the 4th land. So now we're really rewarded for taking the proactive Winter Orb line. Kyrian Dryad played out. We've got Daze back up. Instead of double dazing, we take the greedy line, we let Pernicious Deed resolve. We're going to go ahead and try to draw yet another land, and indeed we do, which makes the play perfect. We get to Ray of Revelation it, we have Dazes now for backup, and all of the stuff is growing Kyrian Dryad. So you could say a bold line, you could say an unnecessary risk. Either way, it pays off immensely, and this, my friends, is pure efficiency. We've used every land available, every mana source available, every turn except for this one, and until that second Vendetta came down, every exchange went our way as well. And the Vendetta does resolve, and our Kyrian Dryad does die, but opponent's down to 5. And the Winter Orb has got him totally locked down, he's totally tapped out, and we've got more threats and answers in hand. So it's Gro-A-Tog time, just because it's that little bit more mana efficient than Kyrian Dryad. Opponent's going to untap, and that's about that. So a very quick win after a very quick loss after a 23-turn nail-biter. Definitely some sweet games here against Rock, and all three very, very different. Of course, this one, like I said, we kind of had everything going our way. So whether or not we waited for the deed to resolve to try to draw the land for Ray of Revelation, or we double dazed it there, the way we did it was higher risk, higher reward. Even if we went for the double days, I think we would have been just fine. When you're on the play and you can just kind of get that right balance, it's hard for even what looks like a solid Rock progression involving Pernicious Deeds and Vendettas and keeping 7, making all the land drops, etc. Definitely can make it pretty tough for them to accomplish much of anything, and that's what we did here. Alright guys, let's play against Rock again for fun. We've got a 4-land, 3-spell hand, but one of the spells being Diamond. This is an unbalanced hand in favor of mana production, but one cantrip off the top into another turns the entire hand on. And the only thing we're afraid of is exactly what he has, which is a Duress for Gush. But we're still going off. We've got a Meddling Mage on Pernicious Deed, we've got Daze backing up, and we are able to counter a Wall of Blossoms, so lots of cards being spent and opt off the top into a foil, which we bottom in favor of Fire and Ice. After Wall of Roots having put a counter on itself, then takes the block, we make the trade. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, the resource exchange with both players top decking has the mid-range deck with a great deal more card quality than we have access to, and also a higher floor of the deck in the face of flooding or in the face of just being put into top deck mode by virtue of that creature land, the notorious Treetop Village. Of course, we draw a series of, 3-4 lands so far in a row off the top. Not particularly good. So the final land, the only consolation is that it's a City of Brass, so we can stylishly go out on our own terms. Game 2 in our second match against the Rock sees us open on a hand that has a lot more to like about it than our first hand, except for the fact that we're operating off double City of Brass. And once again, this is kind of indicative of a core problem sometimes with a deck, in that you are either priced into mulligans or priced into risky keeps, depending on the matchup and depending on your preferences, on the back of these cities of brass, which are a necessary evil, of course, to accommodate the 5-color ambition of this beautiful deck. That said, mulling against the rock, not that bad. If they're really pressuring our life total, I think we're behind and unlikely to come back anyway, as we saw in Game 1. Now, it's more likely that we can come back post-side, but still, I think that holds true. Therefore, despite the pain involved here at City of Brass, and the fact that, for that matter, they do not enable Daze or Gush, we are keeping. We do see a bunch of lands on the top. We're just going to take the Flooded Strand first. That way we can fetch away and only draw 2 lands instead of 3, which is just about perfect. And we are going to actually counter Wall of Roots, because that's going to make our Daze better, and it gives us a mana-efficient turn. Now, we do have Gro-A-Tog with Daze and Gush backup, so it's actually pretty incredible position to be in right now. However, there is sometimes, strangely enough, even in a mid-range matchup, such a thing as too many Gushes, and there we go, we draw the 3rd one, and it's starting to get a little awkward. It would be fine, except for the fact that we gush into 2 lands, so we are actually just sort of weirdly flooded, weirdly shields down as far as interaction goes, and there you go. He resolves a Ravenous Baloth, we have 7 cards in hand, and the only permission we have is a single Daze. So we get to Daze the follow-up birds, but man, how nice would it have been to Daze the Baloth? And our flooding woes continue. We draw land for turn, we gush into a couple more lands, we do finally hit a cantrip at the end of that. We cantrip into another cantrip, but it is all, again, a whole lot of air. We put Winter Orb into our hand, and this may actually have been, so I actually missequenced twice here. Firstly, I should have put Winter Orb second from top to protect it from discard. Now, as it happens, he didn't have it. Maybe he's afraid enough of Gush that he feels pressed into taking that anyway. I'm not sure. Winter Orb is kind of a terror of our play group, and maybe that would be what goes down. That would depend upon his hand. The other thing here is that I just kind of reflexively played the island, but my plan all along was to play the Flooded Strand and fetch away the other land on the top. So a couple of errors, but learning moments, teachable moments for you out there. The deck provides even more selection than it appears, because again, you can fetch away a land, a 3rd unwanted card, land or otherwise, with Portent. So I have flooded abominably here. It's been like 8 of the last 10 cards off the top, now 9 of 11 or something ridiculous like that are lands. One of them, though, is my fault, but the others are not. The good news is we have a bunch of free cards to pitch to Gro-A-Tog, and after the Ravenous Baloth throws out the block, that is a positive trade for us, except for the fact that he's got the Recurring Nightmare Engine online. And right away, I'm just like, okay, and we draw another land too, of course. So I'm feeling like I'm almost about ready to scoop here, because the mid-range card quality as established is higher than ours. And that Recurring Nightmare Engine, it's so hard for us to beat. The only saving grace is that Gro-A-Tog has still got us in the game, and perhaps with a fistful of cards, he's going to be playing around permission, probably rightfully so, that we don't have, especially because if he thinks that, like, playing Drago benefits him against the Winter Orb, if he loses a spell to a permission spell, a 1-for-1 trade does not benefit him under the Winter Orb. So these are things we have going for us, even though we have absolutely no action in hand. It's just kind of wild how that all works. And he's got 3 Treetop Villages down, so more of the things we observed last game coming back into full apparent view here. We do finally bottom another land, get a little bit of action in the form of Swords to Plowshares, then we just draw a little bit more air. It's a Mox Diamond. Could be useful. Probably would want almost any other spell, though. So we let the Cabal Therapy resolve. Don't think he's going to name Plow, and indeed he doesn't. We could have, just to be extra sure, we could have, of course, just plowed in response. Really doesn't matter. He named Daze, I think it was, and now here comes all the Recurring Nightmare value, which again is nigh unbeatable, it feels, when we're just this flooded, but Winter Orb, my friends, keeping us in it, because he's pretty far tapped out, right? And as bad as all the value is for us, you know, if we can just finally find some of the right half of the deck, which it looks like we're getting toward, well, We may just be in it with a shot, despite him being at 25 and despite having so many windows of missed opportunity. So after the wall blocks us, we pump the Psychotog, then we're going to plow the Baloth, and there's no creature on field. Keeping the board clear is definitely really important right now for a couple of different reasons. Now we're talking, now we're cooking. We go Opt into Portent, and we see 3 cards on top that we are totally happy to have. While the coast is relatively clear, we'll put just a little bit of pump into Psychotog, and then Fire and Ice off the top on opponent's upkeep, tapping down the lands, continuing to play the tempo game. And we end up with another couple threats in hand. There's a Dryad and a Psychotog. The second Psychotog is not especially better than the first, except as redundancy against spot removal, but walking into a Pernicious Deed or some other sweeper is always an option. So we kind of split the difference. Play a Dryad, don't play the second Psychotog, but having seen the opponent play a Blastoderm, and us drawing another land, we do decide to deploy the Psychotog, and we're in a bit of a standoff with good old Blasty, which is kind of interesting. It benefits him because he gets to play Draw-Go and untap stuff under Winter Orb. It benefits us because we actually don't have to do anything to get rid of the Blastoderm except just allow its fading to take care of it. So in response to a cantrip, our Dryad will get Vendetted. That's okay, we find another one. Daze and Disenchant chilling in hand. Blastoderm on its last legs, about to bite the dust. Next time opponent goes to his upkeep, so it's one more turn of the standoff. Down goes Blasty, and then what can he do with 6 cards in hand but only 4 lands? Well, Yavimaya Elder. We're going to just daze just about anything. Yelder. Hey, that's a good nickname, Yelder. Yavimaya Elder included. He's going to trade with 2 dazes, but of course, that's going to go ahead and pump our Kyrian Dryad. Speaking of pumping, we just pitch all these excess lands, and we go almost all in on Psychotog. In retrospect, I was playing a little bit cautiously, perhaps, by keeping both of these spells in hand when, I don't know that the Disenchant necessarily does much for us in hand when the opponent's totally tapped out. If he were flush with mana, that would be a different story. In any case, just for style points, we'll Disenchant one of our Mox Diamonds in response, and then whatever we draw for turn is enough to discard 4 lethal. So not quite as impressive in terms of the length, and perhaps the scale of the comeback is our 23-turn win, but still, a 20-turn win after having drawn whatever it was, 10 out of 12 lands in a row or something when we were otherwise ahead and ready to kind of turn the corner. It just shows the power of this deck. If you can just cling on somehow, if you can just hang on to hope, eventually you will start really, really running. You will start chaining spells, you will start having all your synergies come together. And once again, though, Winter Orb appears to be key to extending that game. Otherwise, I'm sure the Rock just runs us over before we can get going after that mid-game flood. But there you go, a turn 20 win, definitely a pretty sweet one. And Game 3, to see if we can take both matches off the rock, we're faced with the prospect of a tricky keep. It's a 1-lander, with Mox Diamond, of course, not being great with only 1 land, but we're on the draw, so if we don't get discarded turn 1, we have 2 looks at a second land, and that is really what turns the hand on and makes it good. It is threat dense as well, which I think overall is good, even if it's a little bit unbalanced here. I've definitely seen way better hands and way safer hands, but compared to mulling to 6, is it keepable? I don't know. I did keep it. I'm receptive to the idea that it might have been wrong to do so. We just want to fade turn 1 discard, and that's what he has. So down goes Opt. We draw the second Mox Diamond. So right away we see 2 more weaknesses of the deck, and I'm not ever criticizing the deck because it is mind-blowing how good it is. I'm just saying it has these points of fragility where, 1 well-timed discard spell, 1 risky keep is bad enough, and then if we draw, for example, we drew the second dead foil against Reanimator, now we're drawing the second dead Mox Diamond, and all we're doing is playing Draw-Go, doing absolutely nothing. Let's pause here, because it's turn 7, and we had not cast a spell until our turn that just ended, besides a single Mox Diamond. Now that's crazy. And also, just to establish another thing, again, I'm receptive to the idea that that hand was a mulligan, but opponent on the play, opening with triple duress, we're getting our hand ripped up no matter what, especially if we mull to If we mull to anything, we take a mull in general, we're getting ripped to pieces, right? So I just want to pause here to note that despite all of that stuff and losing our threat, we're actually not that far behind on life total. We're ahead on cards. What can we do from here? So opponent's got a ton of dorks, letting the treetop village really pressure us. We draw another land, and now it's time to try to get a threat down and protect it. We'll see if we can. And opponent unfortunately has Chainer's Edict, which is quite bad. And a Blastoderm. Oh my god. So now it's Kyrian Dryad into sleight of hand, and we're pretty dead, or are we? Because we sleight into Gush, we get to reset an island, we get to cast Portent again, and we've got a 4/4 Dryad that is big enough to stop Treetop Village from attacking this turn for lethal. Unfortunately, there's flashback on Chainer's Edict. Blastoderm's got us on the ropes. We cannot draw an out. But guys, we, again, by turn 7, had done nothing except cast one Mox Diamond, make one land drop, and play a threat that instantly ate 1 mana removal. Meanwhile, the opponent developed, and yes, he maybe didn't have the most gas-dense hand, but he had Dorks, he had 3 discard spells, he had a Manland, he had a Blastoderm at the top end, and we still were just like 1 or 2 turns away, potentially, from really being able to maybe protect the Kyrian Dryad, or stick another one, stick a Psychotog, outsize the threats. Like, if we had just had that second land a little bit sooner, who knows? And then maybe, again, that is an incentive to mulligan that hand, because even if we mull to a 2-lander, and our hand still gets ripped up by duress, well, we're still top-decking better, right? Because we're functional off the top, unlike with only 1 land and a Mox Diamond. Maybe it's 2 lands and a Mox Diamond, or maybe it's 2 lands and we can draw a third, something like that. But anyway, some awesome matches against Rock. The final match that I'll bring you, my friends, is against Machine Head, so black-red mid-range without the combo. And we've got a sweet 5-spell, 2-land hand with a single threat. You'd rather, of course, have one of the growing threats with a hand like this, especially, in this matchup especially, but we're not tossing a hand like this back. We will take it. Opponent gonna go ahead and mull on down to 6, which is very useful, but then duress is gonna take care of Winter Orb. Turn 1 sleight of hand into Fire and Ice, which I think lines up well as removal against this particular deck. And then we get to go Meddling Mage with Daze backup, see what he's got. Nothing at instant speed, and then nothing for turn 3, including no land drop. So obviously this is fantastic news for us. It's not even necessarily clear that we should 100% play the Winter Orb there, because there are other lines, but Winter Orb is clearly something that he cared enough to take away when we had a bunch of other valid options as well, and this is just a great time to get it down. Then, in theory, we can untap, we can play at instant speed from here. We're still holding up Opt, and Gush, and Daze for that matter, and Hypnotic Spectre, sure enough, gonna walk into the sorry, I almost said walked into the Daze. He's gonna walk into the removal. Here's why. We could, of course, have dazed it, but it's actually more efficient to Gush, draw those cards, and then untap and Fire and Ice the Hypno. Then we still get that Daze at instant speed. We've just had more efficiency, and I think when removal can be used rather than permission, it's better to keep the permission in hand for things that maybe the removal cannot answer. For example, in this deck, Lavaborn Muse is toughness 3. So, opponent's functional, but we have just kind of tempoed him out between him missing land drops and the Winter Orb doing a ton of work. And we go a little bit shields down with Counterspell, but that's fine because we're still holding up Daze and we're still being proactive. Firebolt, that's just going to get us, oh well, it happens. We've seen some good cards on the top with Portent. One of them is Mox Diamond, the other is Kyrian Dryad. Duress will take care of Counterspell, so he is definitely doing a lot of good, efficient things. Lots of 1-mana interaction under the Winter Orb, very nice, but we still get to go Fire and Ice to tap down and grow the Dryad. We're still seeing a ton more cards, and it just keeps going, my friends. We've got Portent. We're a 4/4. Meddling Mage makes Dryad a 5/5. It feels really good, and all the while, Daze still in the back pocket. Psychotog as well for yet another backup threat. Opponent down to 3 mana. Here comes a Stupor, so we're just going to Daze to make sure that last land gets tapped down, and to grow, even though he's dead on board either way. So some nice style points for us. Some more information off of the Stupor, to be fair, for the opponent, and that is that. Game 2, and we are seeing some really nice opening hands. 5 spells, 2 lands, both times. Excellent in this matchup. It's a high density of non-creature spells with 1 threat both times as well, so we have to acknowledge that. Some really, really solid opening hands. And this time, opponent will keep 7 as well. Duress going to take down Mox Diamond. We're going to go ahead and important. We see a couple of Cities of Brass on the top, and a Daze. Daze is what we really want right away. He doesn't play into it, but the cities are actually not bad either. We need green now that the diamond is gone, and just generally making land drop number 3 and number 4 totally fine with our hand. Chainer's Edict is going to be the play. Once again, he misses a land drop. We're showing how crucial that is for the opponent to really make sure they're curving out. We see some spicy ones off the top. There's Mox Diamond, there's Counterspell, and there's Armageddon. I could really see going either way with that selection of 3, but we do indeed decide to keep those on the top. Unfortunately, he's just able to get a Terminate under our permission, but you know what? This is what you get, my friend. Armageddon, destroy all lands. He loses 3, we lose 3, but we've got a Mox Diamond. Kind of a hilarious one of in the sideboard, and you can see why it's good against decks like this. Once again, it's just another thing that breaks parity, and we are both halfway rebuilt, I guess, both finding a land, but neither one really doing anything yet. The land for us was crucial, though, because now we're operational, we're passing, holding up 2 counter spells, a Fire and Ice, a Swords to Plowshares, and that is some good stuff. He does not have another land, but he does have a Duress, which will counter. And then we're starting to get a little bit too many lands. I think 4 mana source is totally sufficient. We'll be proactive, try to see some spells. We can trip into another land. He makes a second land drop, but his red is offline for the moment. So he's discarding the hand size, which is great news for us. We got a Winter Orb off the top. We know how good that was last game. Long may it continue. Engineered Plague, Counterspell, and then back over to us. And just in time, we got a threat off the top. Gro-A-Tog, let's go. He's down to 12 already, and we'll see what he's got. Well, it's a Terminate. Okay, fair enough. Winter Orb continuing to slow him down. We're continuing to draw a few too many lands. And then back over to us, flooded yet again. I don't see any need to play these cards, so we're just playing a little bit of draw-go for the moment. And then, here we go. Now we're operational. We're gushing into a land, a Meddling Mage, and an Opt. We're opting into a Chill. We'll lead on Chill to prevent him from bolting the Meddling Mage, and then we'll just name Lightning Bolt anyway, I suppose for good measure. Phyrexian Arena, nothing we can do about it, and actually I suspect I would have let that resolve even if we could. Why? Because, well, with Winter Orb, he's not going to be able to really take advantage of these extra cards, and losing 1 life per turn is actually quite relevant when we're able to tempo him out, and when our clock is in existence but relatively mediocre. And you can see the arena life loss already doing some work for us, and it's a good thing, because once again, when we kind of are on the front foot, we are just drawing absolutely nothing. So definitely looking interesting. I'm a little nervous. If we had like 1 more relevant spell in hand, I'd be pretty great. But the best he can do here under the Chill and the Orb is to try to animate the G2 encampment. There's a Plowshares for that, and we've got Daze now in the back pocket, which is wonderful. He's had to discard so many good things to hand size. Terminate, Lavaborn Muse, it's just all so rough. But that's life against Winter Orb and its best friends, Chill and Daze. Meanwhile, we're styling with another Mox Diamond, and we're styling with a pretty cool kill. We're all just putting things on the stack for fun here, but basically we're going to let the Phyrexian Arena trigger, take him down to 2. We're then going to throw a Fire upstairs for lethal. Out of spite, Fjord will Red Blast the Meddling Mage, and we're going to say, no, that Meddling Mage gets the Medal of Honor. We're going to keep him alive. We've got a Daze for that, and that is the game. So definitely against a deck that could pose a ton of problems. They've got those Red Blasts in the side. They've also got Terminate, Lightning Bolt, Engineered Plague. all this discard definitely has the makings of a deck that can punch a massive hole in our game plan, has as many answers potentially as we have threats in the entire deck. However, that stumbling at the very beginning, missing the third land drop on curve, just for one turn each time basically, allowed us to really take the front foot, and in this particular match, once we got in the driver's seat, we never let go, thanks, once again, primarily to Winter Orb, but awesome games against an awesome opponent. Alright, friends, so that was a traditional league's worth of Gro-A-Tog matches, right? 5 matches. I only skipped 1 or 2 games that didn't really have any relevant things going on. And in the future, maybe I'll make it even more of a highlights. I intended to kind of do a highlights thing, but really I just mostly play and showed you entire games. Let me know what you think about the format generally, as far as doing a replay versus live recorded, and also, of course, whether you'd like me to kind of clip it up or zero in even more on certain events. I do think that some of the games, at least, were well worth observing in their entirety. And otherwise, you know, if a lot of stuff isn't happening, which is, again, part of the reason I wanted to do this particular deck in a replay form, because there's a lot of draw go, a lot of the opponent not doing anything sometimes. Sometimes we're flooded or we're playing reactively. I do think that this suits it, and I think the play button is fast enough to just kind of fly through that stuff. But you guys let me know what you'd like to see in the future. And yeah, hopefully this was fun stuff for you. I think this deck is one of the most fun ones I've taken for a spin yet in Premodern. The very first time I got a taste of Winter Orb, Mox Diamond, and Daze all working together, I was addicted. I'm a mid-range player at heart. Black-based discard spells are my favorite type of spell in Magic, but man, this is really, really cool stuff, and of all the various iterations I've dabbled in, I think this 5-color Gro-A-Tog deck is arguably the most powerful, and I would say definitely the most fun, so huge shout out to Carlos once again, and to anyone else who sunk time and mental energy and their expertise into coming up with this particular list and the archetype as a whole. I absolutely love it. Big shout out, as always, to our lovely opponents and to you for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the content as well as the list in the comments below. That is always most welcome and most appreciated. I guess that's about all I got for you guys. I don't know really what else to say about how to potentially tweak a deck like this. With 5 colors, the possibilities, especially in this sideboard, are nearly limitless. I'll just highlight who I think were the overperformers. I mean, Psychotog and Kyrian Dryad do exactly what you want them to do in a deck like this. Winter Orb was the MVP. And then if we're talking about what cards to put on the thumbnail, you could see Mox Diamond, Daze, Gush, any number of other cards, including some of the cantrips, are really making their way onto the cover as well. We'll have to see what looks most aesthetic, but thank you, as ever, for watching, for supporting the content. If you would like to throw me a few bucks by way of support, you can do that via Patreon. Link is below. You do get access to the Patreon exclusive Discord that way, and I appreciate everybody doing so. If you can't do that, or if you're not so inclined, that is totally fine. You can just like, you can comment, you can subscribe, and you can maybe share this around. I know Premodern is a niche format, but I wonder if we can get even more traction to this wonderful, wonderful gameplay, the aesthetic old border, and all the other things that make Premodern really fun. So share it around if you'd like, and I'll see you for the next Perusing Premodern. Until then, take care, my friends, and I will talk to you soon.